friends, and welcome to Postscript. Nice to have you with us today. It's a sunny day in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, where we're coming to you, and we're here with an interview with our friend Frank Jacob. And Frank is coming to be with us at Transition Talks on the 16th of November, and he joins us here from what, Bavaria, somewhere in Germany. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Good to be here, John. Thanks for having me. Yes, Bavaria, Germany. Yep.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to having you back. We really had a good time last year when you were here and with us in Berkeley Springs. And both the folks that were here in person and all those that joined us by live stream very much enjoyed your presentation. You're got a background in media and in filmmaking and thinking about really interesting things about where the future is coming and so on. And so thought I'd start this out by asking you, what do you think? Where are we going, man? I mean, we're sitting here with things all going sideways in new ways every day. And where do you think this is going? What's your guess about the rest of the year or maybe into next year?
Well, there's various scales of time that we're talking about here. So obviously, what I'm looking forward to is in the next, 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to be there. Actually, in 4 weeks, I'm going to be there with you in person, right at the time when, America is going through this huge event, this election, and this one in particular, as we all know, has a lot of charge on it. So I think that's one level of chaos or activity that's going on. Chaos, I mean, in the sense that, everyone is, I think, still very they've been a little bit burned by this whole fiasco that happened last time around that led to all kinds of more chaos. And I think everyone's kind of anticipating potentially this kind of chaos this time around. There's all these hypotheses like, oh, if Trump wins, will this happen? And if Harris wins, will this happen? My experience has always been that it was a saying in Germany. I don't know if it translates, but it said things are always cooked hotter than they're eaten. So, I think that people will be charged, but it'll go over. I think it'll be fine. That's my sense. I don't have any fears of getting on a plane and coming over there at all.
Yeah,
But if
well,
we look at the longer scales, I just finished a new webinar and I called it Time Capsule for the Future Past, right? Because it's got information in it about ancient past, about history, long time, going back like 6,000 years. I'm trying to get to the root of where did kind of the trajectory that we've landed on have its beginnings. And you can actually trace it back to those times. So we're talking about a large time scale. And what I'm talking about here is a certain, well, some people call it the age of Pisces, right? The fish age and stuff, right? Well, it seems to me that if you look at mythology, every one of these large epoch areas of humanity, they come with certain lessons for humanity. And it seems very clear that the lesson that humanity went through this last time around in this Pisces era has to do with patriarchy, authoritarian systems, and control over nature. And we tried it, and it's pointless to blame and say, well, this person did that and this group did that. But all these religions, and I think in particular the Abrahamic religions, which push themselves to becoming the dominant force on the planet, have a lot to do with that. But rather than blaming it, it's better, I think, to take the perspective of, well, that was that experiment, and I think it's clear that experiment has failed. So everyone's talking about the next age. I remember all those songs, the age of Aquarius, right? Everyone's talking about the age of Aquarius, and that's another age, another big time spirit period that's just around the corner. But just around the corner also in these scales means about 800 years. So we're obviously not going to see it in the flesh. But there are, indications that the currents that are they're going to be the dominant aspect of the lessons that humanity will be going through in that age are already accessible to us now. And those have to do with wilderness, with nature, with the forces of nature, and in particular with the getting in balance really between humanity and those forces again, to try to get back on track. because I think humanity's ultimate role is to be living in harmony and connection with all those forces, not working against them, not trying to dominate them, not trying to subdue them, but harnessing them and working in and achieving this symbiosis that I think is part of our inherent genome. That's where I would say we're heading. And so to get to the long term, and this is going to what I'm going to be talking about, is, it's chaos to calm, right? Well, how do we get to those places now from here? And I believe, and you put me a challenge when you kind of titled that talk. I didn't even really think about it until you put it there. I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do for this? And it's clear to me that what we're talking about now is we're just going to assume that we're going to land there. Everything's going to go fine. But someone has to start to, first of all, identify the problems that we encountered that weren't working so well for us clearly, labeling them, identifying them, names, places, events, directions that we went into. And the next step, of course, is then not to get stuck there, because that tends to get sort of shrouded in negativity, but to actually pose some solutions. Like what kind of systems correspond to that new time? Like what kind of things are we looking at here in terms of structures around us in society that weren't working before? So I want to introduce or propose, let's say, a few of those different structures.
Well, that'll be very interesting. I want to go back when you early in what you just said. You said that we failed at this last kind of epoch, if you will, and I would challenge you, I guess, on that a bit and say, well, it got us to where we are now. We made certain. I mean, we certainly didn't rise to the occasion in the highest way, but there's a whole lot that has been accomplished that has gotten us to the place where this amazing place to where we're ready, if you will. Not everybody, perhaps, but maybe never everybody was never going to be in the game. I mean, we certainly made some progress.
Well, that's why, I mean, I said lessons, right? And I think it's lessons, and lessons mean we learn, right? We learn. In fact, that's what we're designed to do. We're designed to make errors or make lessons, have these lessons and correct our ways and fix them. And you're absolutely right. And I guess I will concede that point. It's true. We did, it wasn't a total waste. It was like there's this saying that the system isn't broken. It's functioning perfectly the way it was designed to. So,
Yeah.
if we can draw the lessons from that system as it's functioning, because I think it's safe to say we don't necessarily want to stay in the same place pedaling and treading
No.
water, right?
Oh, not at all. And so what's the bigger picture, do you think? Do you think that let's, for instance, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is the what seems to be the very sophisticated, well-funded kind of efforts to essentially tamp down this evolutionary push for humanity. I mean, that there are a lot of things that seem to be just designed to make sure we don't kind of break through. Do you think that's the case?
Well, do you want to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here?
Yeah, sure. We got time.
In the course of the research that I've been doing, I've run across, the material that was put together based on the Nag Hammadi, which is a series of bound books found in 1945 in Egypt, Upper Egypt. And those books are based on the work of a group called the Gnostics. And they have a lot of interesting information in those materials that point toward a force that was there at the origins of humanity. In fact, they have a whole creation narrative which differs from the one that's in the biblical account. And, there's people that have taken that Gnostic material and, they've approached it from the filter of a Christian perspective and used it to kind of like build their Lego blocks into a robot or into whatever. But you can take those same Lego blocks and you can actually find a neutral, unbiased version of what the Gnostics really were. And you find out that they actually put together a very detailed account of the forces that were behind the creation. And one of those forces was kind of a miscarriage of sorts of humanity. And that manifested in the form of something called archons. And there's
Mhm.
an amazing comparative mythologist out there, highly underrated. His name is John Lash, and he's put a book out called Not in His Image. I highly recommend it. But I got in touch with him because I found him in the course of my research, and he's actually the guy that kind of brought that word back into the dialogue, into the internet. Archon. And archons are these beings that are, because they're not fulfilled as humanity, they were created kind of as an accident of creation. And there's a whole accompanying creation story we won't have time for today, but I can maybe tie that into my talk a little bit. But essentially, because they came in as an aberration, there was an envy when they realized what the true purpose of this planet was and what the anthropos was. And so they began to work against us. And they can't actually live within our biosphere. They're not organic biological beings. They live outside of our bubble, but they can affect us by making brief entries. Some people call them ETs. They were even described, can you believe it or not, in this text that's like 2,000 years old, that the description suits exactly what people are describing when little grays are abducting them in groups of three. And they even had a whole instruction manual for Gnostics who were encountering them way back then already. So they've been around a long time, and they've influenced us, and they've tried to penetrate in, but they have limited access physically. So the way they do it is they do it mentally. And in fact, there is a very interesting story about how they locked into our neural network. And because they did that, they essentially chose a vector race and that vector race carried this through the world for thousands of years, to the point where this ideology, which you could summarize as being kind of like the ideology of master race or master slave relationship. And this isn't actually what we were designed to do. And this master slave race ideology is reflected in pretty much everything you've seen happening. You can look at it historically, and in fact, in my webinar, I do talk about it historically, right into concrete examples of the Second World War, and and before that, into this mentality that is there, that there's some element of the human race which believes it's superior to others. And that, I think I've seen you talk with Greg Braden about this, these religions that are kind of like the stumbling block because they seem to idolize this idea. We have to get past these belief systems. And it's interesting because Gnostics, the word itself means to know, and they were about knowing rather than believing. And they were there at the time at the formation of Christianity. They came forward to say, nope, this isn't the way to do it. But they were removed from the dialogue. Their books and all of the stuff they had accumulated, they were the ones that were the mystery school founders that set up all these amazing mystery schools that were going on at that time, the Hellenic Age, and all these books that formed what's called the Library of Alexandria. They were largely responsible for putting that together. And as we know, that library is lost some way or other. Either it was burned or the Vatican took it and stashed it in the basement and won't let us have the key. So, we're looking at information which was basically lost on a sliver, a fragment of that information resurfaced in the Nag Hammadi. And that's what, we have to sort of look at that and take it seriously. And that'll actually show us where some of these mistakes, and that's what they called them, because they didn't believe in an evil element in the universe. They only believed in error. And errors that go uncorrected begin to fester and turn into these systems that we see around us.
Well, that's interesting. It kind of parallels a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with Barbara Marciniak and some of her books from the late part of the 90s and so on. Communicating, apparently, her conversations or her engagement with what she calls and they call the Pleiadians. And they have a, a Genesis story, if you will, that is very much along that same kind of line. I mean, it's got its own kind of colors and its own kind of ideas, but they in fact say that this early kind of dominant race looked at humans and said, you guys are going to get out of hand because you got 12 strands of DNA and you're going to eat our lunch someday. And if we don't do something about this, and so that they really did genetic modification and kind of broke up and fragmented 10 strands of DNA, and that process we're going through right now is the reconstitution of that DNA into 12 strands, and that is kind of the essence about this emergent new human.
Well, you can find, the thing is, you can find, and because, as if you look at it comparatively in other mythologies, you can find elements of this same story in other cultures, of course, and that it almost becomes kind of like a meme in a certain way. This story of intervention or interference from some extraterrestrial force, and I think that is real. I think there is something to it. What I like about the Gnostic material is that it's the earliest known. It's called, like in Germany, the word is Quelle. It's source material. It's the earliest known source material we have, so it's to be taken very seriously. Um, and this is why I'm looking at it so intensely, because I went through a lot of years where I studied works that were channeled, other, belief systems that I got into. But I feel with this material, it's really worth looking at because it's kind of like this goes back to the earliest, accounts of this stuff by human beings and the way they describe it. Now, one thing that's interesting, what you just said about, the changing of the genetic strand and stuff like that. One thing that is very powerful, even more powerful, you could say, than the DNA, is something called epigenetics. And epigenetics means, it's the way, it's what sits on top
Wow.
of the code. It's the way the code is carried out. So there's a famous, I mean, I think you know Bruce Lipton,
I
and
do.
I mean, he did a very infamous. Oh, he had an infamous experience, let's say, in a lab where he cultured the same identical clone cells in different cultures, right? And different, and one was, we have in our body a culture that's blood, but outside of the body, you can create these nutritional cultures which simulate blood. And he created three different cultures. And what happened is that in one dish he got like muscle tissue, and another dish he got, neural networks, and another tissue. It's like what happens is you find out that it's not the gene that decides how the organism will emerge. It's the environment it's in,
Hmm.
right? This is so powerful, man. This is like,
Yeah.
so if we look at the cultural medium, we can expand it outward to being the external influences on us, sensory experiences. When we feel like chaos and panic, well, we're not gonna, the way we express our genetics is going to be different than if we're living in a totally different environment in the world.
Well, you're making the nature and nurture a kind. You're embellishing on the basic idea of nature and nurture, and that's a very powerful idea. I didn't realize that Bruce had done that kind of work. Well, so what's therefore the function of this period of time that is so full of stress and irrationality and everything else? What do you think that's like doing?
Well, I think it's forcing us to look at it, because I was looking at myself. I can only speak for myself, and I've been at this stuff like, cosmonaut, you might say, for quite some years, decades, really. And I've gone through a lot of belief structures and systems that I've looked at and analyzed and tried on to see how it fits. And in the end, you kind of realize after you go through them all, like, where does it bring you, right? And I think a lot of people, and in my case, I'm at a situation where I'm looking at the world, I'm going like, well, even with all that, all those years and all, embracing all these thoughts, you would think we would be much further along and towards changing it than we are. And so there are small groups, and I'd say we kind of belong to a smaller group of people that are beginning to just tune in, wake up, or whatever you want to call it. Just there, that sense that it's time to get the information out there, to build systems that are going to carry the system forward in a more harmonious way. But that's not the majority. The majority of people, if you go out on this sidewalk and you just get your ear to the ground, you just realize that the average mentality of people out there, as much as we all wish and we think everyone's getting enlightened, it just isn't there yet, right? So this is where the chaos, I think, for the most part, is coming, because those people are beginning to sense something is up, but they don't know what it is. And so they're just reacting. The one
Yeah.
advantage that we have when we study this kind of stuff and we talk about it and we put it out there is that we can put it on the table and analyze it just like an experiment, just like Bruce Lipton's experiment. We can say, okay, well, look what's going on, and look what's coming at us, right? This is the stuff that we can identify. And when we know and we can see the monster out there, we're not as scared of it any longer. We can actually, we can see it, we can work with it, and we can embrace it as what it is instead of being shocked by it or just being reactive to it. So I think that the time ahead for the people who are awake or aware is going to be one of dealing with this issue of, like, on the one hand, staying calm, because when you're tying in and tuning into those future frequencies and flows, you're actually anchoring this calm energy now. But of course, you have friends and family, and not everybody's in the same state, so they're going to be tugging on you. So the biggest challenge, I think, for people that are waking up is to deal with the ebb and flow and tug and pull of the circumstances around them and still remain in a very focused and balanced place.
Yeah, interesting. But do you think these archon entities are kind of in an extremis or an existential situation to where they see this big transition as something that is likely to take away the kind of the energies that sustain them, and therefore in the short term certainly that there are going to be increasing attempts to try to maintain the status quo in some way or another?
Well, they are there as, in a way, as our teachers. They're provoking us to stand up and take back our power. And, once we know that, it's less of a problem. Are they gonna expand or increase or be thrashing to try and maintain control? It's definitely possible. I don't think, we've had an open enough dialogue and interaction to kind of really determine that. But I would say that the signs of their presence is everywhere, and they are a parasitic being. I mean, let's face it. There's another word for them in the Native American perspective. I think it's called Wetiko. They're
Okay.
talking about these entities that which actually get into your mind, and they're so deeply anchored into our minds that they begin to make decisions for you. So if you're not aware of them, there's experiments they did, with Toxoplasma gondii, where mice were jumping into the mouths of the cats, literally, that were infected. So we have to accept that there's this parasitical infection, and that's what they represent. But it doesn't mean it's the end of us. It certainly means that it's the end of them in a way, or the end of their penetration into our bubble once we realize that. So are they going to put up a fight? I would absolutely be certain that they will put up a fight. But I think it's ultimately in our destiny, and it's in our blueprint. And if you embrace the Gnostic creation narrative about a plasma being at the center of our galaxy, these aeons, as
Yeah.
being the God creation forces, and the idea that Sophia was so in love and attracted to the human experiment, which had previously failed, according to the legend, she left the safety of the pleroma and actually sort of flew into the arms of the Orion Nebula and collided, with all the matter, and became tangled up in this whole drama. And ultimately, what happened is she actually turned into this planet. So she is like Gaia,
Yeah.
Sophia. She
Right.
is the planet, and out of this planet is, we emerged. She's our habitat, and we have this symbiotic relationship with this higher plasmic being. And plasma science is backing up a lot of these stories now, and more. There's this guy called Tsidovich, this Russian researcher, who proved that plasma has consciousness. And so it isn't much to extrapolate if you have a little bit of AI-like consciousness in a tiny lab experiment, that if you blow that up to the size of a galaxy, you're talking about consciousness here on an unfathomable level, right? And it's interesting because if you look at these paradigms, you can see a correlation fractally between the neural network of a human brain and the neural networks of plasmic lines running through the entire cosmos. So there
Yeah.
is a plan here. There is an idea, and the idea was that we would have to manifest this freedom, this free will, and this absolute creativity, and we would pull it. That's the plan for us to pull it off. So I think it's inevitable that it will be pulled off. The question is, are we going to be the ones that are going to pull it off, or are we heading into the sixth major extinction level event on the planet? And we have to decide: are you going to be the compost, or are you going to be the gardener?
Nicely put. Frank, what's the best book that you would suggest to try to understand the whole Gnostic Gospels
Well, I would say just John Lash's book is a good starting, in fact, probably the best starting place, because what I like about his work is he's not, he hasn't conformed it to some belief system or ideology. He tried to look at what the Gnostics in their own purest sense were like. And that's a good place to start before you go
And
anywhere
what's
else.
the name what's
It's
the name of
called
that book?
Not in His Image.
Not in his image.
Definitely
Great.
check it out. And the other thing you can check out is Time Capsule for the Future Past, of course, because I tied that information into some very, very amazing historical material that coincided with. So we just kind of hit it off and had a great collaboration on it. So that's another place to kind of look at things.
Oh, that's great. It's going to really be fun to have you back, and we'll continue this conversation kind of writ large, and wander all over the world in the afternoon that you'll be with us on the 16th of November. And so we're looking forward to that. And for our viewers, let me remind you that that's Transition Talks, and that's what we do every month here at the Arlington Institute. And we come to you live from Berkeley Springs, our little resort town in West Virginia, about 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore. And we not only hold forth with a delightful kind of local community, but we also live stream this all over the world. And so no matter where you are, you can participate. You can find out about it at arlingtoninstitute.org. And we hope you'll take a look. And Frank, we're looking forward to having you 16th of November, Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock till 5 o'clock. And it's always fun. We get together and have dinner with 30, 40 people afterwards. And it's a delightful kind of community and engagement kind of process for trying to get ready for this and participate effectively in this amazing kind of change that's going on. So thank you, my friend.
Well,
Nice to
it'll
have
be an
you.
honor to be there and join you. I look forward to it again, just like last year, and have a good time before I get there.
Great. Thanks.